When people talk about having that dog in them, they usually mean grit, hunger, and an unshakable will to keep going when everything else says stop. But a few characters embody that idea in such a bizarre way, almost paradoxical way, than Arthur Boyle from Fire Force. Because Arthur doesn't like your typical symbol of relentless drive. He's delusional, inconsistent, and sometimes he's outright incompetent. And yet, when it matters most, he becomes unstoppable. That contradiction is exactly what makes Arthur one of the most fascinating representations of the dog mindset. Not because he's always locked in, but because he shows up something deeper about belief, identity, and strange psychology behind greatness. Arthur Boyle teaches us that the dog isn't just about effort, it's about belief so strong it bends reality. Arthur genuinely believes he's a knight, not in a metaphorical way, not in a motivational way. He truly believes it. And in most situations, that belief makes him look ridiculous. People underestimate him. They laugh at him. Even his own allies question him. But here's where it flips. In battle, that belief becomes fuel. The stronger his conviction in his knight identity, the stronger he actually becomes. His plasma abilities sharpen, his focus tightens, his power scales with the intensity of his imagination. And that's the first lesson. Most people think having that dog in you is about discipline alone, but Arthur shows it from the very start with his identity. If you see yourself as weak, hesitate. If you see yourself as average, you plateau. But if you truly see yourself as something greater, even if it sounds insane, you start acting in alignment with that vision. Arthur doesn't try to become a knight, he already is one in his own mind, and that certainty removes doubt, which is often the biggest thing that's holding people back. But here's where Arthur gets even more interesting, because his powers aren't stable. It fluctuates wildly depending on his mental state. If his illusion cracks, even slightly, his strength drops. If someone disrupts his fantasy, it becomes weaker, slower, less effective. And that teaches us the second truth about being the dog mindset. It's fragile. People love to romanticize resilience like it's permanent. Like once you lock in, you stay that way forever. Arthur proves the opposite. Your mindset has to be protected. The world will constantly try to break your narrative through doubt, criticism, failure, comparison. And the moment you internalize those things, your performance drops. Arthur isn't weak because he lacks ability. He's weak because he stops believing. And that's real. How many people lose momentum because they can't do something, because they start questioning whether they even should in the first place? There's a twist. Arthur's delusion isn't entirely a flaw. It's actually a strategy, just not one he consciously closes or chooses. Because in a world filled with overwhelming threats, brutal enemies, and constant pressure, Arthur's mind created a framework that allowed him to function at its peak. He turned reality into a story where he could win. And that's the third lesson. Sometimes having that dog in you requires something of a nature of rewriting your own narrative. You don't have to see things exactly as they are. You don't have to see them in a way that empowers you. Arthur reframes fear as a dragon to slay. He reframes conflict as a knight's duty. He reframes struggle as a part of his legend. And because of that, he never runs from it. Most people get crushed by pressure because they interpret it as proof through not being enough. Arthur interprets it as proof that this is his moment. But let's not ignore the downsides. Arthur's mindset is powerful, but it is also limiting because it relies heavily on illusion. And this brings up the most important and most grounded lesson. Having that dog can't just be a fantasy, it needs to be a foundation. Arthur can't reach insane heights, but he's inconsistent because his strength depends on maintaining a fragile illusion. In real life, you can't rely purely on belief. You need skill, discipline, and repetition. The difference between Arthur and someone truly elite is this. Arthur becomes unstoppable when conditions are perfect in his mindset, but true greatness means performing even when your mindset isn't perfect. That's where the characters like Shinra and real-world high performers separate themselves. They don't rely on things like feeling like a knight, they rely on systems, habits, and consistencies. So what does Arthur Boyle ultimately teach us about the dog? He teaches us that it's not just about grinding harder. It's not about these three layers working together. First, identity. You need to see yourself as someone capable of winning for you. The world confirms it. Second is belief. You need a mindset that amplifies your ability instead of limiting them. And thirdly is stability. You need something real, discipline, structure, skills, to hold you up when the belief wavers. Arthur masters the first two, but struggles with the third. And that's why he's so compelling, because he's not perfect. He's raw, exaggerated version of something we all experience. Moments where we feel unstoppable, and moments where we feel like the frauds. Moments where we're locked in, and moments where everything else slips away. But when Arthur's at his peak, there are few characters more dangerous, because in those moments doubt doesn't exist, hesitation doesn't exist. There's only forward motion, and maybe that's the final takeaway. Having that dog in you isn't about never breaking, it's about knowing what version of yourself is capable of and learning how to return to it, again and again, until it becomes your default. Arthur gets there by pretending to be a knight. You don't have to go that far, but you do have to choose who you are and commit to it with some sort of intensity, because at the end of the day, the people who win aren't always the most talented. They're the ones who believe and act upon it, and persist like they already are.